saw the word nudes in the title. He's like, this is going to be great. Right? So he stood in line, he went to the nudes panel, and he was kind of making jokes during our slideshow of messages that we showed, and I think one of them is, what color are your panties? And he's like, that's not harassment, that's just fashion, right? And so he just kind of kept going, he was making people uncomfortable, and then at some point Morgan asked, and apparently he kind of got quiet after a little while, he kind of curled it on himself a little bit. And then Morgan asked the audience, who here was shoppers? And there's probably like, 30 people or so who raised their hand, and apparently his hand shot up. And I was also on the panel with Jenny Hanover, who runs notinthekitchenanymore.com, and we played some of her audio messages. She records lobbies in Call of Duty. And apparently after those audio messages, that guy bolted. Like, he absolutely just couldn't handle it anymore. He just bolted. So, I mean, we had hugely supportive and packed audiences for these panels at PAX. But I really want to, find that guy and give him a hug and tell him it's going to be all okay. And I want to sort of, in some ways also recreate that experience where other people sort of can change more minds just by the obviousness of it.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do with, that we hope to do with Fat, Ugly, or Slutty is present evidence against, some myths that are in the gamer community. I mean, the number one is there's no girls who game. There's no girls on the internet. And that's obviously false. I mean, you're here, right? But there is a phenomenon that I think Grace calls, I've forgotten the name that's used, but it's sort of a reinforcing cycle where, if a guy thinks there's no girls on the internet and he hears there's a girl playing on his team and he hears on voice chat, either he thinks this is a girl and, might say then, or some sexist thing, and then she decides this harassment is enough and then never plays with voice chat again. And so then he never hears that girl again. Maybe there's no more girls on the internet. I don't know. Or he hears he plays with a girl and doesn't know that it's a girl. And likewise, he just assumes that the player is a man and plays with a person, and still there's no girls on the internet. And so it's sort of a reinforcing cycle in that way, either in both directions. And so obviously, this is the most basic thing we could try to combat. Is definitely there are girls who play games, and it's obvious because the girls receive these messages that we show off. So there's that. And then the next one is one we get quite often is these are just kids. These are young kids. Ignore them. They'll grow out of it. But the problem is we have voice chat and we have voice messages. And you can tell the difference between a 6-year-old and a 16-year-old guy.
And a 26-year-old guy.
And a 26-year-old. Yeah. It's.
How so?
Well, yeah, you can fake older and younger to a degree, but the preponderance of, I don't think we've had any voice messages from younger people, have we? It's all older people.
I think I'm trying to say maybe one.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no.
Yeah,
and definitely not with Jenny Hanover, too.
Yeah, and Jenny Hanover records these, and I wish we'd had more time. I could possibly play some, although they are a bit offensive. But they are all these are late teens, early 20s men who play these games and utter the most vile things, and it's a learned behavior. People, these men. Learn that this is acceptable and go on to do this. So even if they are kids, there's no reason to think that they'll stop when they grow up. And we can see that they don't stop because we can see how they treat girls on voice chat. We can see how they treat girls in video game stores. We can see how they treat female developers. And so it's not just a bunch of problem children. So these voice recordings definitely help to get that out to a wider audience. And then the next thing we see is that men get harassed too, so...
As a reputation.
Yes, men get harassed too, and you don't see them complaining that they got told they're a fag and should shut up. So why are women complaining, right? And this is actually the biggest objection we get from people who think that there's no point to having our site because men get harassed too. But of course, the harassment men get differs both in quality and in quantity, and in intensity from the kind of harassment women get. And we have a couple of ways to argue this point. And the first is we simply have numerous accounts of team-based games where male players, upon hearing that there's a woman on their team, will actually sabotage their own team, or at least not play as well as they otherwise would, just because they can't handle having to work with a woman. We have Jenny Hanover had some specific examples of that, I believe.
Possibly.
And
I mean, you're from the PMS clan. You're nodding too. Like I've heard a lot about betrayals and Halo and stuff. So it's just as soon as that happens, it's like, well, get rid of the woman, then to be playing.
Yeah, and you also hear about women who say, well, yes, I have stopped playing with voice chat, or I've stopped playing online games altogether. And you don't hear that about men who have experienced harassment for being black or gay or whatever. And lastly, many women do effectively hide their gender online, whether through disguising their voice or not using voice chat at all. And they can definitely tell you about the massive differences that they get in terms of harassment. So that's one of the other things that we are trying to say this is not actually a real refutation. This is what the world is like. There is a difference. And then the next one we get that people try to bring up is that women bring it on themselves for exposing their gender. And frankly, we see this claim a lot, and I think it's a claim in bad faith. Because there's all these games where team chat is essential to doing a good job. And even if it's not, voice chat builds community, it builds camaraderie. And you can't expect a woman to lock herself out of that just to keep you happy. It's just not fair. It's othering them. It's putting them in a second class. And even if it's not voice chat, there's still profiles. A man can build a profile or an avatar that adequately expresses him, but a woman can't if you follow this rule. And so we think this is just not even arguing with good faith, so we don't want to spend too much time addressing it, but whenever we see it, we do try to shoot it down by talking about team communication. This doesn't make any sense. It's just not, doesn't hold up. And then the last one that we get is that complaining is pointless, it doesn't do anything. And well, the thing is we can show that it does. Grace has the story of the guy at the panel, and we have these examples of men who have seen the error of their ways and apologized. And also that the more people show that this is a problem, we see that people will band together on that. So we definitely think that this is, that complaining does have a purpose here, and by sharing these problems, we can help to make the world a better place for women gamers.
All right. I need a lot of water during this part. Okay. So I've been kind of obsessed with the idea of developer tools over the last little while. But first of all, I kind of want to talk about what we have now, sort of the way it is, and sort of the standard advice that people, men and women, receive when they encounter somebody they don't want to really deal with online is forms of ignoring. So there's muting. Muting is great. It's great in terms of that individual victim muting that individual bully, and then the bully moves on to somebody else. And then that individual victim mutes that individual bully, and then moves on to somebody else. That individual victim mutes that individual bully. So it's understandable for an individual person. That makes sense. But it kind of feeds into this whole, something that I take a lot of issue with, which is don't feed the trolls. And I don't really believe in that. I don't think that Fat Outlier Slutty would have gotten popular if it wasn't for don't feed the trolls. Because it's the idea that you ignore it. You just kind of let it roll off your back. You don't talk about it. You don't talk to your friends about it. I didn't know that Ashley received these particular messages because the standard advice is don't feed the trolls. Don't bother anybody else with it. Just kind of deal with it and move on. So I take issue with that. The second thing about what we have now for advice is reporting to moderators. This is great. This is fantastic. Nobody thinks it works. Nobody uses it. There's a serious, and we've heard from moderators and operators of services over and over again, yes, please tell us. Please at least give us a chance. At least give us a chance to actually do our jobs, help us do our jobs in this way. So there's no faith in the tool out in the gaming community, and so people don't think that reporting works, and therefore they don't report. So nothing actually happens in that sense. And the last thing that we kind of have is player rating systems, and of course the most prominent example is the Xbox Live 5-star rating system, where everybody has 5 stars and therefore nobody has 5 stars. I can tell you from most of the screenshots that we get in, the particular style of the screenshot will show like players' name, avatar, gamer score, race, I think which they chose in pro, family, or underground, or whatever. Everybody's got 5 stars. The vast majority of the submissions inbox has 5-star ratings for the people who are being featured on the site. So, I'm telling you, it's really frustrating as a programmer to see this, because this is a fundamental piece of code that your users don't know what to do with. It is meaningless. Like, nobody knows if you're supposed to rate somebody 5 stars because you think they're a great player, or because you're really happy you killed them, so your kill-death ratio went up, and so that's awesome. Or if it's because you think they were nice, or they were quiet, you don't want like chatty people. Nobody knows, nobody uses it the same way. We all get 5 stars, gold stars, go home. Okay, so the way forward. This is what I'm really excited about. So when we talk about, in these kind of settings and contexts, and we talk about the patriarchy in terms of a system, a systematic oppression of women and minorities, we don't usually like to try and focus on individual actions or incidents. We try to actually sort of, see what systems sort of brought about a particular sexist incident or something like that. And what I'm really excited about in the game world is that we actually have a chance to write new systems. We can literally codify, we can literally write code about something that actually promotes good social behavior and inhibits bad social behavior that everybody can kind of get on board with. We can attach stigmas to bad behavior. And so I was really, and what I'm really trying to get at is we have to actually sort of initially have that kind of moment of realization that we can actually think and talk systematically as opposed to just socially within games. So I was actually really excited that I was able to talk with James Portnow of Extra Credits, and I don't know if you guys saw the episode they did on harassment. And they specifically take this sort of balanced approach in all of their sort of game culture commentary episodes. And he wanted to sort of provide dev tools, sort of, what can we actually do about it as opposed to just sort of complaining and getting angry about it. So they talked about 4 different things. The first one is kind of the most powerful, and that's auto mute. And I believe Halo Reach has this. I'm not sure about other Halo games. So the idea is that if a player is muted enough times or by enough other players, they become automatically, initially, muted for everybody. Makes perfect sense, right? And so some people, were really critical of this idea at first, that came in the episode. And I think what they kind of were critical, they were talking about, free speech, as opposed, which, doesn't really get into the whole public space versus private space on Xbox in the first place. But there were some criticisms about that. The second one, sort of related, is earning the right to communicate. So the way they presented this in the episode was that if somebody, so there's actually, this is the important part, there's actually some data and metrics already collected by some game systems and publishers. I'm not sure about publishers, but some systems and games have metrics. And one of the metrics they have, besides how often a player is muted, is also how many times a player is actually has a response to a message they send out. So the number that they threw out there was like, let's say 80% of messages that a player sends out are not responded to. We can infer possibly something about that, their messages may be unwanted communications. Let's say they're spamming a link. Let's say they're being abusive, right? They aren't getting any replies. So the idea here was that you could sort of limit that person to only talking to their friends. You can only send messages to their friends. They can still send out friend requests. Makes perfect sense, but you can really talk to their friends. So I just wanted to talk about some of the critiques about 1 and 2. Some people were also critical that this was sort of like some sort of permanent solution against bullies, but that's not where we have to necessarily take it. We can talk about this in terms of, again, systems, thinking systematically. As we're building in a system and thinking about a system to sort of limit the bad behavior, we can also think about systems to bring them back into good behavior. There's no reason why we can't think about systems to sort of have them earn their way back into the good graces of society, basically. Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, go back, actually, yeah. So earning the right to communicate was a suggestion they had. This one has a bit of problems. So the idea is you have maybe a gamer score requirement or an achievement requirement before you could actually use voice chat or any sort of messaging methods in the first place. This inhibits sort of like the initial sort of build-up of an open community. So there's problems with it, but actually I think what they're really trying to get at is that, in fact, I'm almost certain that today's Slutty post is exactly like this. We have today's post is from somebody who's on the Xbox Live Gamer Spotlight, so she's getting quite a bombardment right now. And there's this one it's like about 10 messages, and it's just continuous. And so what I'll try to do is I'll try and go to the xbox.com and make sure I'm spelling their names right. It's like I versus L's and O's versus zeros. And he's got a